Hey, how y'all doing? Let's do it to it. Alrighty. Excuse me. Let's see here. Perfect. Okay. Wait to move. Let's make it a study. Alright. Perfect. One second. Okay. We will read this, and then I'm going to give you a second look at this. Uh, this is a game between Vladimir Kramnik as white and Peter Schindler as black. So black has only a pawn for the exchange, but white lacks a pawn that could. He, but white lacks a pawn that he could try that he could try to promote to a queen, basically. So let's try that again. But white lacks a pawn that could try to queen. That he could try to queen. Take everything off the board but the pawns, the kings, and a white rook and a black bishop. It is possible to draw here. Yes. Yet black resigns in six moves. White acquired that due to two factors. The first was his tactical vision. He saw that the impossibility of bishop takes f7 was possible. After black captured with queen takes d, let's see. We'll put this in here. I want you to stop. Find a good move for white here. Stop at this moment if you're watching it pre-recorded on the YouTube account, Just Cruncher TV, and on YouTube, of course. Stop now and see if you can find a wonderful move for white that gets an exclam mark. Okay, now we're going to continue onward. Bishop takes f7 is the exclam idea. So this is kind of the impossible move that looks like it doesn't actually work here. It looks like the impossible. After black, so he saw that the possibility of bishop takes f7 was possible. The impossibility of bishop takes, that was possible. And after black captured the bishop, then queen could actually potentially play queen takes and get two rooks, like I'll show you right here. And then you take here, if he takes there, you take here, and you take there, and then you have two rooks for the piece. Rook takes, queen takes, rook takes, bishop takes, rook takes, rook takes check, king h6, and rook takes c. And this, but see then after all that, rook take leads to an endgame in which white has two rooks to battle black's queen with an equal number of pawns. But calculation is only as good as the evaluation that acquires it. The second factor that won the game was white's realism that the endgame is a win. In fact, it's relatively easy to play that move we just saw right here. This is the promote this line here. Surprisingly, this is a one endgame, because the two rooks will actually outmaneuver the queen, and when they start working better together, they'll start being a powerhouse of an attack. White, here we go. White aimed for this because he knew the general case, bearing a complex factor. Two rooks beat a queen if pawns are equality, if the pawns are equal. The winning plan is elementary. The rooks will double on the A file and win the pawn. After that, they can pick up the king pawns in the same way. So, like the queen's going to try queen d6. Oops, not d6. Queen d3. I mean, to attack the rook. Okay, beats queen. King side the same way. Black made it easy by playing queen d3. Hoping for rook a1, and then queen d4 to start taking pawns would be a good move here. The king went and did a really cool move, king g1 exclam here. The king now covers f2, and rook a1 is a threat now. See, if you're thinking right off the bat it's an interesting continuation, but queen d4 is an exclam at this point. And now it's almost resign. It's almost like resign, not resignable, but draw. And then queen takes f2, and with a likely draw because black's threatens perpetual check, but white avoids that with king to g1, and white has a majority on the king side, and black has a weak pawn on the queen side that can easily be targeted. It was safe for white's rooks to win the pawn. It was too late for black to push it. So black resigned here. If the queen tries queen to d4, this was a potential try. Rook c2. In view of queen a4, rook c1. So if the queen tried this here, rook c1, and a5, and then rook a1, queen b4, and then rook a2 exclam at this point, and you're going to pick up the pawn with rook f a2, and the pawn's going to fall. You just have to know these plans. Also, if back here, king g1, if queen had played a5, then rook a1, a4. Yeah, you can't take this right now because of a tricky, this is actually a tactical threat of that. So there's a tactical threat to that. But rook a7 handles that beautifully with an exclam mark. Yeah, like what we talked about, rook a2, a4 is a double question mark blunder because of this move here. And now the game's lost. It's all over. So let's set up another one. Okay. Let me get a drink here, then we'll get started. That was good. Okie dokie. Just want to make sure I have it all set up right. Oops, I have to move the queen over. I thought the queen might be offside. Okay. Okay. Let's make this a study. And then we'll read the new section inside winnability. Okay. So TSEI. Well, this is an interesting name. TSEITLIN. Okay. It was played in Leningrad. Oh, great. Did I get this all messed up? I want to make sure I got this right. Perfect. Finally. You know what? You just gotta laugh at it. Alright. It's from White's perspective. We'll get it. Don't worry, my friends. Okay. The section inside of winnability, it's chapter 6, is necessary. How? Another important factor in assessing whether a position is favorable enough is simply whether you can imagine how it would be won. But imagining isn't the right word. Imagination has little to do with what it is. It's a matter of visualizing a plan. So what they're saying. Another factor of asserting is basically having an imagination on how the position would be won. And number two is imagination really isn't the right word. It's visualization, visualizing a plan that you can implement. And it's White to play here. White's last moves were bishop to f3 to f2. So the bishop was on e3 and went to f2. And he wants to maneuver his king basically from, he moved his king from c2, and then he wants to he moved from c2 to d4 and into f3 to attack h4. I'll show you what I'm saying. The bishop was here and it moved there. The knight was here and it moved here and to there. So this was where the knight moved from. Started off at c2, went to d4, and then went to f3. Now the knight is attacking h4. And potentially black would love to get the queen to e1 and then have a triple attack on h4 and basically win the pawn. That's kind of the play that they're wanting. I'm going to win the h-pawn, but black has enough defenders. Potentially, if you tried like rook e2, and then you tried playing, he would play actually king g8. So what we're talking about is what black actually played here was what white actually played here was a really interesting move. I want you to stop it and see what you think, because what'll happen is if you think about trying to visualize winning the h4 pawn, you don't have enough material, because the rook will basically, after king g7, rook would go over to h8 and defend. So you have to see a little bit deeper, imagine a winning position here. Stop right now for white and see what you can make of the position. It's an exclam mark. Stop right now. Okay, we will now look at it. Knight g5 exclam. Now the knight blocks both queen and bishop, and the pawn will fall if left unguarded. So what potentially could happen is, if you were thinking something like this here, rook e2, king g7, which is actually, this would be an exclam mark, I gotta say. It's a really strong move. Bishop e, and then rook to h, and the position now is solid for black, and I'm thinking I think it's a tide turner for black. I think black's potentially holding here, and maybe even a little bit better, because there's really not much that white can try here. Yes, the white can't really enter onto any of these squares here, and the idea has just fallen apart for white. So white tried a better idea of knight g5, and what this does is, if the bishop were to take on g5, then f takes g5, and the pawn will fall here. And so that's kind of, you have to look a little deeper. But black has, after we showed the defense, after queen e2 and all that, yes, he can go after the pawn immediately with knight g5 and then bishop takes h4. Then black doesn't have time to play rook, king g7 and rook h8. But knight g5 is a big step because bishop takes, pawn takes creates a bishop of opposite color that might be a drawn endgame. Black can get closer to an endgame with rook e8, and then you trade and queen trades, and potentially it's an opposite colored bishop ending. What makes the position in the diagram a critical moment by playing knight g5? White might either be throwing away a very favorable position or nailing down a win. White figures out that a knight takes g5, bishop takes g5 would be a win, and it had nothing to do with the extra pawn. He can visualize without calculating that once black has no dark squared bishop, he is highly vulnerable to mating threats along the diagonal of the dark squares. On the dark squares, white can't be sure without calculating a lot. That it will be a forcing win, but the visualization tells him it should be close to a win. So what White looks at is not just the win of this. White looked a tiny bit deeper after the bishop's gone off the board. White had noticed that the queen here would guard, would threaten a typical mating idea of a rook and queen. If a rook can get here, if a rook can get up and over and like that, that's mate. And with the queen after this bishop comes off the board, that's what they noticed, was that this diagonal, the a1 to h8 diagonal, would be a vulnerable point because the dark squared bishop's gone off the board. You do, with a slight visualization, you do have to look a little further. And so bishop was forced to take, pawn takes, rook e8, and then oh, sorry about that. Not bishop. Bishop takes, pawn takes. Okay. If at this point rook e8 were to be played, then bishop d4. Oh, so I was right. Okay. Okay, that was right. Okay. Yeah, sorry about that, team. And then this was played. Bishop d4. And what White had visualized was when g5 was played, there would be a knockout plan with the bishop going to g6, forced by queen f2, and queen takes h4, with a queen going to h8 mate, protected by the bishop on the king. Now that the position was has been calculated, he can calculate a specific variation. A simple one runs into, we're going to actually do the move that black played though. First and foremost, let me see, bishop e4. Bishop e4 was played here. So a classified mistake for black would actually have been this. Trust me, your opponents cannot resist playing this move. Takes, and then queen takes g5 is actually a double I would give it a triple question mark howler. This is actually losing. This now is a losing move here because after king comes up, you get checkmated. So mate. A better defense potentially could be at this point rather than taking queen d7 are potentially king f8, hoping to flee the king. But on queen d7, then you still have the same problem. Queen f2, king f8, queen takes, etc. And then you have the idea of mating right there. And there's really no way to win this position for. There's a way to win this position for white, I should say. So that's an interesting idea. And if rook takes e1 check, queen takes e1, queen a4, king h2, with the hopes that you can basically get a bishop here and then checkmate. See, the idea is if this was played here, you're thinking, wow, your opponent just hung up. You're just like, yay, they hung a pawn. No. You couldn't even give them another pawn. I'd be more than happy. Yeah, take it, please. Another double question mark blunder. 2 back-to-back blunders here. King g8 check, king up, and then mate. You gotta love that. You gotta love that with that type of move. So maybe this one would just be maybe the first one would just be a 1 question mark, and then I think the first one would just be a 1 question mark, and then the second takes would be a total blunder, because two blunders would basically be losing in this. So I'll be merciful and give the a2 a just 1. So okay, so bishop black also visualized this idea and said, no thank you, I'm not going to fall into that wonderful visualization, checkmate. He was hoping that the queen would go to f4. Black was hoping the queen would go to f4 and then basically not see the idea that's going to be coming to pass. But we did. And this pawn move here. So that's why c4 was played. Protect the pawn. You know what? White still has all the ideas in the works. There's even a queen coming to c. Surprisingly, this is an incredible move here. Queen c3, bishop h8. If king comes here, you actually have queen check, and then here it's just incredible. This is kind of one of those moves that your opponent's their jaw's gonna drop when they see it. It's like, what? This could actually be playable? Yeah, your opponent, you can actually play this and have an advantage, surprisingly. c5 is played in a bid to discourage h4 or d4. Okay, the bishop went to c3, so you know, I don't know if I might have been tempted to have played my bishop into f6. I don't know, I might have been tempted to do that. Queen d7, king g1. The idea, of course, you got to see that the queen idea here is this, the cheapo using a pin. So white just sidesteps that, removes all counterplay, says to Black, what's the plan, friend? And there really is no plan. White's neutralizing all of Black's counterplay. So once Black loses all of their initiative, White's going to be the one to strike. Now you get to see the power of the dark square bishop being gone. How powerful this diagonal is right here. And that all started with a visualization. Black had run out of good defensive tries. So if so b5 was played here. Queen f4. Now you're double attacking the bishop and the rook with here, and then that's being attacked. So there's two targets that are under fire. b4. Now bishop f6 could be played, and it's basically game, set, and match now. There's not really much that could come to pass here. Bishop takes g2. Queen takes h4 exclam here. This had to be a deep calculation here. I know that you're supposed to get concepts, but this had to have been a deep calculation. Because White noticed that the queen really can't check anything. Even after rook takes e1 and then potentially king h2 and then rook h1 and then basically king takes g2. There's really no way to win this for Black. Any more threats? Rook takes e1. King takes g2 exclam. Okay. Alright, maybe that was a better move. Rook e2 and then probably king f3. King g1. Wow, nice. Yeah, because if king f2, there's a potential queen check, and even if you went here, I don't know if it's a perpetual. You really don't want to get the queen activated, and there's really no safe spot, and I don't know if it's winning. So king g1 is actually the best continuation because g3 is protected and e1 is protected. So those 2 points are protected, no more checks. And this is a resignable position. This is a one position for White now, because White's the one that's threatening mate and 1 now. So that's the threat, and they're covering these 2 points here. The positional in one game. It is useful to check with an analysis, basically annotators, but it means more to a master when he can say with confidence that he has won. He knows it can be finished off with fairly simple moves, or direct moves. He doesn't have to do a lot to win the game. The game is already won. A position that is merely favorable isn't in this category. It requires precision, not just pre-calculation or precaution, as in the next game that we're going to be looking at right here. So you have to look further than the position at hand right now and see. We're going to be seeing another game that has useful ideas that we can see what I'll talk to you while I'm setting up so that we can do two things at once. Andrew Soltis is basically teaching us that in a favorable position, it's not considered a winnable position. It's just favorable for us. So you can't put it in the category of a won position. That position after g5 was considered by our opponent to be drawn, and so they didn't even consider that knight g5 was a possible move to be played. Because if it's played, wouldn't that be a draw? Bishops of opposite color is usually a drawn position. We're taught that in principles, right? Yeah. So I think it was black overlooked. Yes, black overlooked the dark squares, though, that one A1 to H8 diagonal, because of blindness. That's why I remember what Grandmaster Simon Williams says, that sometimes the principles are meant to be broken. Sometimes. But you have to be good, solid enough in the principles that if you break them, you have a idea or a concept that you're going to be using that will justify that. Don't just break them for breaking sakes, because that's not going to give you an advantage. Like, that's not what Andrew Soltis is saying. He's saying work within the setup of that. Grandmasters know when one position is won, or masters and grandmasters do, usually. And it's all based on the principles that sometimes we get blinded by just principles. So you have to look a little deeper and say, could this move actually be played? And surprisingly, that move, even though it was considered by principle bishops the opposite color drawage, white knew that it was winning because of the dark squared weakness. So black to play here. I'm going to make sure I have this all set up before we click go. Okay, now we can click go. And then let's put in the players so that you have a game if you wanted to go over it. That's the whole point that we put these in, is if you wanted to look it up and go over the entire game, you could. Sometimes the books have games that aren't in the databases, so it's really cool to have books to go over. This is 1977. That's a pretty old game. That's cool. So we got to look at it from black's perspective here. Okay. Okay. Black sees that he has the advantage of because the weakest target on the board lies at C4. If he can get to play bishop takes C4, black, white will not be able to hold the pawn down on D4. On the D pawn will not be able to be held. And probability, it'll be doomed, and his light square bishop may be fatally exposed to an attack. If that's not a positional lost game, it seems very close to. A quick glance shows that if black played bishop a6, white can defend with his queen to let's see, it says c4, queen c4, can defend the queen, the pawn on c4. Oh, gotcha. If the bishop were to play bishop to d2 or bishop a3, let me see. I'm not understanding this one. Let me see here. So what they're saying, that if black got this in here, white can defend c4 with his queen. And let's say on potentially not on d2. Probably b3 is maybe what they're talking about. Oh, snap. Did I not put the... Oh no, we're good. That's just after a couple moves. Let's just get the first move in for black. What would you play here, since this bishop to a6 move really doesn't work at the present moment? There's one move that is really good for black. Stop right now if you're watching this on a recording and solve it for yourself. Excuse me. If not, continue to watch and we'll keep playing, pushing forward. Sorry about that. Let me see. That was a tickle on the lip. Oops. I hate when this happens. Sometimes my book closes. Okay, let's get back to our position. Okay, just 1 second. Thank you for bearing with me on this. Okay, so g5, and then now it's forced that the bishop to retreat back. And now queen a3. Or bishop a3. Yes, black's king position is loosened up a little bit, but white is tied down to the defense of the c4 pawn. And can't exploit the king side. In fact, queen a2 was played here, and then knight to h5 exclam. Oops, this is an exclam move too. Black has more opportunities and threats with basically f4 or f5, and then f5 after this move here, f5, and then potentially f4, and then just the king side onslaught. This is getting very close to a positional one by a territory. So white played knight to c1, f5 to trap the bishop, and the idea is trying to provoke a weakness via h3 for white. f4 was played by white here. Oops, sorry about that, team. Let me see here. f4, e takes f4, rook takes wait a second. What did I... I'm missing something here. Queen f7. That's my bad here, because that would lose a knight. Now f4. There we go. Now we got it. f4 allows the position to be open with e takes f3, rook takes f3, and then queen to g6, a5, f4 exclam here. E takes f4, g takes f4. Now we've reached a one stage. That means black can rely on fairly rough moves. The rest of the game was not very fun to be played, basically. Bishop f2. Rook a, e8 to attack the queen. Queen f1. So black's just pushing back. Rook e4 to attack the pawn. A takes. Bishop takes c to attack the queen now. Queen d1. A takes b6. Black's just basically pushing. Black's the one with all the initiative. Surprisingly, black is a safer king. That is really strange, to say the least. With all the space air around the king, the king can't be got. It doesn't have any way of being infiltrated into. Really couldn't think of a word there. Rook a4. Yeah, b5. This one's straightforward. Rook a6. Rook e5. Another, this is an exclam move. You're going again for another type of setup. If the bishop tries to win on c5, you can play rook takes d6. Rook takes d5. If the bishop tries to take on c5, the rook could take on d5, and you're winning. That's a very nice move. Gets played. Rook f e8. Ooh, nice. This is even better because now you're threatening checkmate and winning tons of material. This gets an exclam mark. I like that move. I like it. King f2. Rook e1. Rook takes d6. And then queen to c2. And exclam. That was beautiful. That's a beautiful continuation. So beautiful. Because if the queen takes, you have a mate on f1. That is just beautiful with your rook. That is so beautiful. That's just so nice. So nice. You don't get to see as well played a game. We'll go over that again. That's just so well played of a game. And you could see how black just tightened up all the bolts and all the bolts and hammer down, all the weak spots. And then a5 is attacked, and then the bishop retreats back. You attack the queen, get everything involved. Doesn't forget anything. Takes. The queen comes. Has calculated everything perfect precision. Attacking, and then that was probably all visualized. So they resigned, and then in view this is I'll put this as winning for black here, because if queen takes, then you have checkmate, and you don't get to have that played very often. So a little extra care and evaluation to look at G5 made a huge difference. To win a game, you typically need a how. It could be a general plan like black's kingside advance. In the last example, more specific like mate on the long diagonal theme of the previous one, without a how, even a position that seems hugely advantaged, with a huge advantage, may not be winnable. Here, there's one striking example. I think we can do one more before. Let me see how we're doing on time, because we're doing so good. Yeah, we got enough time for one more. Hip hip hooray. And then we'd be entering a whole nother section inside of the chapter. That'll be fun. Can't wait. And the next chapter will be called The Golden Rules. That'll be fun, the Golden Rule. Can't wait. This is another Kramnik game as black, and his opponent as I don't know how to pronounce the player's name, but he played a really good game here. So I can't wait to see this one. Oops. Yeah, there we go. I have to get all the pawns set up. Okay. Let's get the kings all positioned right. Now let's set up all the pieces. Oops, I almost forgot a rook. That wouldn't be good. All the pieces have to be on the board. Oh, right. Let's now take a analyzing to see if we have it all positioned right. We do. We do. We do. Yes, we do for sure. Nice. All right. Let's put in the game. And let's saves me having to type in Kramnik, so that's nice. Yep. White to play. So let's read what happened. White, this is White enjoys iron control of the C pawn, C square, and considers and a considerable advantage in operating room. White does. There is no black counterplay. All of the aggression seems basically unwinding seems in place for a slow and plotting win by the world champion. So this is um, basically Vladimir Kramnik has a good game being set up here. And he's basically, everything's locked down. There's a humongous amount of control over the C file, and he could white can just slowly, because the position's closed, slowly develop and improve, because Jeremy Soma talks that when a position's open, you have a more of a dynamic, like when the center's open, but when it's closed, you have more of a static, slow developing move. And a lot of your opponents at certain levels aren't patient enough to slowly develop. So you might run into some who are, but just keep that in your forefront, that just remember, static position, slow development. You don't have to do too forcing of moves. Just develop, 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 and get to a position where you won. White lacks a plan. He can't improve his position through simple means. He could find a way to play like a6, or go after the b pawn is a target. Moving the furniture around aimlessly won't do the job either. So the game ends in a draw after a series of moves beginning with f1, bishop f1, 98, c7 to c3, queen d8, queen d2, knight f6, and then rook to c7, 98, and then just back, knight f6, and then perpetual would happen, threefold repetition. He had no how, that's what he says. White had no how in this position. No way, no plan, no idea of an improving position at all. I'm thinking that Kramnik may have been able to win here. Let's just take a look real quick. Maybe with a4, then you have a slight issue with this, so you can't really do that. Maybe you can play b5 here, and then if black tries just locking down the position, maybe you can play like that and try to control spatial advantage. Then he comes back. Maybe you can even play a rook kind of moving if they take, you can take like that, and then try to stop the attack via something like this and get going. I'm not exactly sure, but I'm thinking that you should try to push a little bit, but at a certain level you have to kind of just come to realization that you're not always going to get a one position here. Yeah, we'll hold off on this because this is a slightly bigger section that's coming up. And so we'll do a quick wrap up and then I'll say adieu on this. Yep, perfect. Okay, so what we've learned so far is, let's get to that. Okay, we're already winnable. The necessary of how. Another important factor is asserting whether a position is favorable enough is whether you can imagine how it would be won. So you have to imagine how it would be won. But imagination isn't enough. It's not the strong enough word, the author says. Imagination has little to do with it, but it does. So it's kind of like it's one of those things. You first have to imagine it, but you have to go beyond the imagination. You have to look a little bit further, and you have to say to yourself, what do I need to do for this to be a reality? And you have to then take your visualization or your imagination and take it out far enough so that you can see if the position's winnable, and you get a plan that way. And we've learned that moves, you just have to look one move further in your play. And that is like when you see an impossible move, see if it's possible, if it can possibly be played. Like the last game, G, right here, I believe this is the last game that we went over here. I think it had something to do with G5, yeah. This move looked like it weakened Black's position, but in reality, it was a 1. This was a winning move. This is actually the move that started the win. And then our second to the last one here, Knight G5 looked impossible, but it's playable, and it actually wins because when you'd think that when you trade it off, you get into the principle of a drawn bishop of opposite colors, but in reality, the whole sequence of the idea was this diagonal right here. The A1 to H8 diagonal was the winning idea for white, and Black overlooked that, and it ended up being their demise. And so that's the whole idea behind those three ideas: is have the imagination, then take it and visualize it on the board, and make a plan based around it, as long as it doesn't lose in your games. And so just keep that in remembrance, how important imagination and visualization is. And remember that, above all things, there's also a really important thing that you always have to do. We have to make a decision to receive the Lord Jesus, Lord and Savior of your life. That's as important as visualizing a plan. Because you have to one day decide, what are you going to do with the Lord Jesus Christ? And that's why Bruce Lee says, take what you know, so take what you learned from this, my friends, apply it, be willing to do something with it, and remember, like what we talked about, there are plateaus in life. The human potential that the Lord Jesus has made for us of our mind is vast. We do have plateaus though, so just remember that it is part of life, but don't be satisfied staying there. Go beyond it. And one more thing that I like the quote of Tango that Tom Thumb Thumb told Tango was to treasure your victories, learn from your losses, and remember that mistakes do not define you. It's how you handle the mistake that defines you as a chess player and a person in any field the Lord has called you into. And that's why the Team Chess Cruncher motto is in place of hanging up your coats, hanging up your hats, sitting down and studying when most won't. Team Chess Cruncher does, and that makes all the difference. And as Wesley So says, serve the Lord Jesus, and as I say, God bless, and I'll see you next time on Chess Cruncher TV. Have a blessed morning, afternoon, evening. Lord willing, I'll be back on tomorrow. We'll keep pushing forward and having fun, improving. Remember what Hannibal Smith said, and it makes perfect sense now. The closer and the more we learn, we get to understand why he says, even inside of a random position, there's always a plan, the visualization. And when we see it and we implement our plan and we imagine it and it comes to fruition on the board, we get to say, I love it when a plan comes together. Okay, 2 thumbs up, hoorah, be blessed. Keep studying chess, honoring the Lord with the gifts that He's given you, and having fun. And remember to click the follow, and I'm on every night. And if you want to join us, you're more than welcome to put in if you have questions on the board. So keep pushing forward, keep pushing play, and having fun in chess. Okay, 2 thumbs up, hoorah, be blessed. And I will see you tomorrow. Go Team Chess Cruncher. Bye-bye.